All right, hello everybody. Let some people get on here. Gonna get this posted as well. So we're just gonna put this here on the storm right now. So we're looking at our storm. Let me get this posted up. All right. Hello, everybody. Let me know in the chat there if you can hear me. Let's see how that's going. Just gonna get this posted on my profiles here. All right. Okay, everybody, thank you for saying that you can hear me well. That's great. So, looks like I got 12 people in here so far. So let's take a look here at what is going on currently. I'm going to start here with the satellite imagery. You can see we've got the storm offshore of the Oregon coast right now. You can even see we've got some lightning going on in there. That's pretty cool. So that means this storm is really strengthening. You can see that it is starting to turn north a little bit. So what we're watching is the bent back occlusion on the south side of this storm. That's what's going to bring those very strong winds. So you can see we got a lot of lightning. Actually, that lightning is increasing there in the last few minutes. So let's take a look at our winds currently. You can see not a ton going on. We've got some gusts offshore, but this storm's still pretty far away. One thing that we should have start increasing soon is that coastal jet along the Oregon coast. You can see a gust 47 miles per hour there in Newport right now, 48 down there by Coos Bay, it looks like. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in here. So far, it looks like we've got about 25 folks in the chat there. That's great. So not much going on right now across Western Washington. However, that is going to change soon. If you have a barometer at your house, I'm sure you notice that it is dropping quickly. Mine is. I see Leon in the chat there says that his barometer is dropping in Auburn. That is something we're going to see continue over the next while here. If we want to take a look at that pressure, let's take a look here at the European model, and we can take a look at the pressure forecast. So let's zoom out here to the Pacific Northwest, and then we're going to take a look at the pressure. So here we are looking at about right now. So this is currently 8:30. This forecast shows 7 p.m. By 10 o'clock, you can see how this storm starts to strengthen. Then you got this low right off of the Washington coast that moves right into the northern Olympic Peninsula there early tomorrow morning and then moves across western Washington. This would be a very powerful storm with a lot of impacts with a really sharp pressure gradient behind it. So let's compare kind of what the Euro is showing. So at 7 p.m. you can see it has the storm basically off of the central Oregon coast. If we take a look at the official, this is our live satellite imagery right here, and you can see it's a little bit, the low center is right in here where these clouds are swirling. So it is off the central Oregon coast, right off the Lane County, Lincoln County line there on the central Oregon coast. And you can see That Lane-Lincoln County line is right, it's right about here. So the storm is performing as forecast so far, although that lightning in the storm, that's pretty interesting. So that's something we're going to have to watch because that means it is strengthening. Let me just do a couple updates here. Let me check in on the chat. Hey, you're welcome, Nancy. Glad to be doing live streams. Actually, my first time doing this, so bear with me if we have any problems. So y'all in the chat can feel free to ask any questions you've got, and I will try to answer them to my best ability. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to look at some of these forecasts here, and we can see some of the impacts that are possible here. So one thing that I know we're all curious about is the European model. That it is known for being the most accurate forecast model that we've got, and you can see that it has actually done quite well over to the day so far. You can see around 4 p.m. it showed some strong gusts across parts of the San Juans, the Strait of Juan de Fuca there, parts of the that would be eastern Jefferson County there, Discovery Bay, Sequim, Port Angeles, and Port Townsend, pardon me. And then you can see as we go through tonight, this forecast, we can actually just put it on wind gust here. So we have at 10 p.m., you can see we start to have winds pick up on the coast, and then those winds continue to pick up from Olympia southward as we go through about 1 to 2 a.m., and then we're going to move up to about 3 a.m. there, and you can see we've got the gusts starting to move into western Washington or into the lowlands there, but you can see how the bent back occlusion, which I'll talk about in just a second here, makes landfall over the Long Beach Peninsula and then starts to move with that strong current of winds up the Puget Sound. Big wind gusts potentially as late as 8 a.m. That is the one thing that we're kind of looking at so far is the timing. We're not really sure on it. There's a westerly surge coming down the Strait of Juan de Fuca. There's going to be strong winds across the Sound and on the coast. So we have to kind of pinpoint the timing of this thing. Like I just said, the European model showed that here at about 7 p.m. that storm is going to be offshore. By 10 p.m. it's starting to consolidate even more, and by about 1 a.m. it's right off the Washington coast. This 10 p.m. forecast has it, or sorry, the 7 p.m. forecast, that's a little bit closer to the time right now. This has it off of the central Oregon coast, and you can see if we go up to our satellite, it is off the central Oregon coast. And I noticed here in the chat, Jaden was saying the storm looks like it's overperforming so far. We're not entirely positive on that, but having all this lightning in the storm, that is a pretty good indication that it's strengthening quite a bit. The thing we have to watch is how much of a northward jog we get over the next little bit here, because over the next few hours, the farther north this goes, you get this bent back occlusion right here, which is this strong current of southerly winds on the south side of the low. Once that makes landfall, where that goes is going to determine where the strongest winds are. So if we look at the European model here and we take a look at wind gust swath, or actually, a better way to look at the bent back occlusion is to look at this. So let's take a look here. We're looking at wind speeds at about 2,500 feet, and you can see that as we go through tonight, so this is about 7 p.m., you have that low off the off the Oregon coast there, and you can see the strong southerly winds to the south of the low. And as the low continues to develop, we get to about 10 p.m., and then by about 1 a.m. there, you can see that low is right off the coast, and there's the bent back occlusion, these strong southerly, southwesterly winds on the south side of that low. And when that moves inland is when you're going to get the strongest wind. So you can see that will move inland as we get to about 4 a.m. there. You can see it starting to move onto the Long Beach Peninsula there, northern Oregon coast. And then look at that 7 a.m. That bent back occlusion is right over parts of Puget Sound. And that could bring some really strong winds to the area. You can see then we get the westerly surge behind it by about 10 a.m. there. So the European model really shows quite a storm for western Washington, excuse me. If we want to take a look at a different forecast here, so this is the NAM model, another high-resolution forecast. We can compare this to the European model, except we got to do it the other way because it doesn't like this. So here's the European model, and we will compare it to the NAM model, and we'll take a look at kind of the differences in resolution and what that is showing. And let's put this on our max gust, and then let's take a look at the differences between the NAM and the Euro. So we're just going to put this all the way out through this storm here, and Hey, there we go. We got Mark Stewart in the chat. A good friend of mine there, great photographer. You should follow him on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. Influencers overhype, that it happens sometimes. But this, like Mark said there in the chat, this isn't hype. This is, you got all the forecast models that are reliable showing a big storm across Western Washington, across the Willamette Valley, some of the Oregon coast especially, and the Washington coast. This is not hype when every forecast is showing it 12 hours out. So just want to put that out there. This is going to happen. Just the question is the extent of it. So the NAM model versus European model. We got the European on the left, the NAM on the right. And there are similarities. There are actually a lot of similarities. So you can see that both, and this is concerning, both the NAM and the Euro have a strong area of winds across the Central Sound, especially from Seattle southward there. So if you look at the European model here on the left, this is this afternoon's run. We've got it showing 60-mile-per-hour gusts over Seattle, and that is that's significant, to put it lightly. That will cause damage. You get 55 plus, and that really does start to cause damage. You can see the Euro has places like SeaTac Airport 58 miles an hour, Tacoma 50 to 55, Olympia 55. And Shelton there, 59. And then take a look at the westerly surge it has across parts of Whidbey Island with gusts near 60 to 70 miles an hour, especially the northern half of Whidbey Island. So if you are on Whidbey Island there, follow Whidbey Island Weather, Jonathan Pulley. He's a great resource to follow for Whidbey Island about the best weather information you can get there. So we've got the wind on the coast as well. You can see there are some differences in this. The NAM has, or the Euro here on the left, has a much stronger on the coast than some of the winds the NAM shows. So you can see on the NAM, much higher resolution. You can see how the Euro kind of has, it's kind of globby at times, is kind of what it looks like. And on the NAM, you have these it's very smooth. You've got a lot of different, you can see all these different little terrain features on the NAM, but it still shows gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour from Seattle to Tacoma, and then 50 to 55 for Shelton, Olympia, and then the coast all the way up in the 60s. So, hey, Mark, thank you for subscribing. And yes, please don't forget to subscribe, folks. That's a great way to help this channel grow. And, it's great. We got a bunch of weather folks around here doing YouTube and Blue Sky and Facebook. So, obviously, we all know Michael Snyder. He is not live streaming right now, but he has a great video this morning as well, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Check that out, too. But for now, we're just going to keep looking at these forecasts. So, we see the NAM model. We see the European model. These are similar. So now let's take a look at the high-resolution rapid refresh model. This forecast has been really interesting today. This model has been really going back and forth with some of these forecasts, and we do have the 0Z model out. So let's run this through, and you can see it does show these strong winds across Western Washington, but it is not as strong as some of the other ones. Hey, West Coast Weather in the house, folks. That's Jonathan. I was just talking about him for you folks on Whidbey Island. He's a great resource. Jonathan, if you want to put a link to your Whidbey Island Weather Facebook page in the chat, that would be great for anyone up there. So let's take a look here at Washington on the NAM. We're going to take a look at wind gusts here. Oh, sorry, this is the HRR. So we got the NAM and the HRR. Those are our two high-resolution forecasts. You probably hear weather folks talk about those somewhat regularly. So the NAM and the HRR, those are our two high-resolution models that we look at. There are some other high-resolution models, but these are the most accurate. And you can see this is showing something slightly different than the NAM is. It's showing lesser winds over Western Washington, but bigger winds over some of the Willamette Valley. And this is a little bit out of my area. As you know, this channel is called Western Washington Weather, so we're mainly looking at Washington. But if we do have folks down in the Willamette Valley, Portland, Salem, Eugene, and all of those communities, there is a chance for some pretty strong winds down there as well. And I don't believe there is a wind advisory up for those areas yet. So if you are down there in northern Oregon, especially in the Portland metro, watch out, because let me take a look here. Once this loads, yeah, we got a wind advisory for Western Washington, but there is no wind advisory there for for parts of Oregon. You have the high wind warning on the coast, of course, but we don't have any wind advisories for the Willamette Valley. So, this is just a just a situation where the alert might not be out yet, but the impacts are still going to be there. So while we're here, let's just explain a little bit of what this means. This brown here along the coast, high wind warnings. This tan across the interior, wind advisories. You got the pink over the waters, that's gale warnings, and then this magenta over the Cascades is a winter storm warning. So cross Cascade travel has not been great today. Snoqualmie Pass was closed earlier. All the passes have been seeing a ton of snow. So let's go back here to the high resolution rapid refresh. You can see gusts of 45 to 50 miles per hour instead of 50 to 55 or 50 to 60 as some of the other high resolution forecasts have shown. So that shows that there is some disagreement still. We're not, even though we're only a few hours out from this storm, I mean, the storm is literally right off the coast, and we still have some disagreements in the forecast, so that is something to keep in mind. Here's a high-resolution Canadian model. We don't use this one a ton, but it does show some similarities to the NAM and the HER. You can see that the Canadian model has these area of strong winds for Seattle and Tacoma. They're gusts of 40 to 50 or 50 to 55 miles per hour, and then that westerly surge, although it shows it mainly going into Lopez Island and southern San Juan Island instead of making it to Whidbey. That's questionable. We'll see if that happens or not. And then the GFS model, it's the American version of the European model, less resolution, generally less accurate, and it shows. You can see that this thing is not all that accurate, although it does show 50 mile per hour winds over the Puget Sound and then big winds over the Willamette Valley. We generally take this model with a grain of salt as of late, just because it's not known for being that accurate. So we're not going to look at the GFS much more tonight. In fact, I'm probably going to close that one up so we can just focus on the more reliable forecasts here, such as the European and the NAM. And you can see here, if we want to take a look again at how this storm is performing so far, here is the European model forecast for 7 p.m., and again, here is the current satellite view of this storm. The storm is right off the central Oregon coast, although you can see it's starting to move northward. I just said a little bit ago that it was off the Lane and Lincoln County line on the Oregon coast, and it's starting to move north a little bit. So let me take a look here in the chat and just see what we're looking at here. Leon says, once it gets to a certain point, the models are useless, and nowcasting becomes a method of forecasting, watching satellite images and observations. Definitely, and we are getting quite close to that. We're getting close to that point where we're just going to be watching these wind observations here on this screen, which we will put back on here, and we're looking at these satellite images and even sometimes looking at these radar images, which, speaking of which, we've got some more moderate to steady rain moving across the lowlands. That's going to continue over the next few hours. But yeah, we are looking at these satellite images and the wind observations increasingly more as the storm gets closer, because you guys are right. Once you get to a certain point, the forecast models are only going to tell you so much, and you just need to look at what we're seeing in real time and then kind of compare that to the forecast models and see what's going on. So as of right now, it's 8:45, everybody, and you can see we got winds gusting up to 49 miles per hour in Newport, Oregon. As that coastal jet starts increasing, take a look just offshore of Newport there. We have a gust of 69 miles per hour, South 49 gust 69 on the Stonewall Bank buoy off of the Oregon coast, and that 69 miles an hour is the peak there so far. However, with this coastal jet, which is the strong current of winds right off of the Oregon coast, that's going to increase these wind speeds in the coastal communities there. As we go further south down the Oregon coast, you can see all the way down in Gold Beach and off the coast of Cape Blanco, you do have some big winds already going on. As we go up here across western Washington, you can see winds are generally offshore. Some decent gusts on Destruction Island up there, up to 57 miles per hour so far today. But across the lowlands, not much going on. You can see 40 miles an hour at the Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. Bellingham gusted to 61 this evening, but has calmed down since. So, not a ton going on right now, although we do look to have some areas of strong winds across parts of Sequim and Discovery Bay. There you can see a 42 mile per hour gust right off the northwest part of Discovery Bay right there. That's pretty interesting. that's just these offshore winds ahead of this low. So if we want to add pressure here, and we can just take a look at the places that are reporting sea level pressure right now, you can see that pressure is dropping. We're down to 996 millibars in Forks, 1,002 millibars here in Seattle, 1,001 millibars in Olympia, and 997 there in Astoria, 998 in Hoquiam. So if you have an not an anemometer, those will be nice too, but if you have a barometer, you can watch that needle dip down as we go through the evening here. If we click on this one, this is Boeing Field, so let's just take a look at how that pressure is dropping so far. That's an indication that the storm is coming. So here's sea level pressure, and you can see how since early this morning it has just started dropping. It's been dropping steadily all day, but that drop has really increased tonight. So Leon says the barometer has dropped close to a full millibar since I started streaming. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I noticed when I came home from Christmas dinner that the pressure was about 29.68 inches, and then when I started streaming here, we're at 29.58 inches. So it's dropping pretty fast. And that would make sense. We got a storm offshore. This thing is curling up now. It's starting to get that shape with the dry air feeding into it there. We even have lightning on the south side of it and some lightning off Vancouver Island here. So, this is quite interesting to watch. It's great that we have these satellite tools so we can see where the storm is going. Generally, if we're going to be expecting really strong winds over the Puget Sound area, the place you're going to be watching for this area, this bent back occlusion, the storm to make landfall, is going to be, you want the low to make landfall over the northern Olympic Peninsula or far southern Vancouver Island here for strong winds across western Washington. That's just generally a rule with how things go around here. So as of right now, if we want to take a look at where we're expecting the low to make landfall on all of the different forecasts, this is something interesting to do just to kind of see the spread in what the forecasts are showing. So as we go here, the European model is the strongest with this storm right now. It shows a 979 millibar low making landfall in the northern Olympic Peninsula. That is a recipe for a big storm over western Washington. If we take a look at this on the NAM model, we can see that is a 977 millibar low making landfall just north of Cape Flattery there with that strong gradient behind it. You can see it weakens pretty quickly but has a big gradient behind it, bringing 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts to the Sound and then a big westerly surge to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So both the NAM and the Euro do have quite the low, making landfall right on the tip of the Olympic Peninsula there. If we take a look at a different forecast like the high-resolution rapid refresh, you can see it has a weaker and more broad low making landfall, but also on the northern Olympic Peninsula right there. So something else interesting we can do is take a look at the European model ensemble forecast, and we can take a look at where we have all of the ensemble members putting this low. This is the 18Z, so this is this afternoon's European model run. And you can see that we have the spread of the ensemble members having this landfall this low from central Jefferson County there around maybe Claylock Lodge up to Tofino and points northward on Vancouver Island, with some being in the middle here. So this is usually a good indicator of the tighter these are, the better certainty we have on where this storm is going to go. But this has tightened up some since earlier today. Bradley asks, can you show a model that charts all of the models paths to see what the spread is? That's generally not something I can just pull up. We don't really have a forecast that like a spaghetti plot for a hurricane. We don't really have that for the Pacific Northwest and for our lows. So generally we just kind of flip between these forecasts and try to see where each one is going. So another thing we can look at, though, is we can take a look at the ensembles and we can see how these forecasts vary for the wind gusts over a certain location. So, for example, we're looking right here. Let me put this to Seattle. So here's SeaTac Airport, and basically how this works is you have the control run of the European model, which we were just looking at, and then you have 50 different ensemble members, and each of those ensemble members manipulates the initial conditions slightly and gives you a slightly different scenario. So you take these all combined, and it gives you a consensus of what the European model is showing. So these are more helpful when you zoom in on them. So we're going to zoom in here, and you can see some of these numbers. So the European model control run has 56 mile per hour peak gust at SeaTac Airport. Some of these other ensemble members have some wild gusts. You got one all the way up at 75, but see, you also have one at 38. So that shows you that there is still spread. The majority of these members are over 40 miles per hour, most of them over 45 miles per hour. You have a good bit here. Take a look at some of these. A good bit over 50 miles per hour. You got 57, 54, 55. A few 60 plus. That is generally unlikely, but is possible. And then you got even more 50 plus miles per hour. And when we zoom back out, you can see here at the bottom we have the ensemble mean. So the ensemble mean is at 50 miles per hour, which means that the average of all of these ensemble members is a 50 mile per hour gust for SeaTac Airport. That can cause damage. That can cause some power outages across the area. Let's take a look at somewhere else. So let's take a look here at Hoquiam. Hoquiam, you can see that peak gust is higher and it lasts for a longer time. You got a lot of members here at Hoquiam showing gusts over 60 miles per hour, a few over 70 miles per hour, and even a couple over 80 miles an hour. That I don't expect that to happen, although Hoquiam did hit 79 miles per hour earlier this month with a storm back on, that would be late on the 17th and early on the 18th there. So let's take a look here at somewhere else. Another place that this storm could have an impact would be Whidbey Island with that westerly surge. You can see they have the southeasterly winds today, those gusting near 50. And then take a look at the European model showing the westerly surge. You have a big spread on how this westerly surge could occur. Some models showing only around 20 miles per hour, 25 to 30 miles per hour there. But some, you got a few of these dark ones here showing 60 to 70 miles per hour for that westerly surge. That is possible. And just for fun, if we want to take a look at the Oregon coast, that coastal jet moving along the Oregon coast could bring some really big winds. You can see the mean gust for Newport here is over 60 miles per hour, with a good portion of these ensembles showing 70 to 80 miles per hour. So the potential for high winds across the area is definitely there. However, that is not the only impact we could see from this storm. So let's take a look here, and we're going to look at the National Blend of Models. This is a high-resolution forecast run by the National Weather Service that, in my opinion, does a good job at looking at how much precipitation we are going to expect across the area. So here is, we're going to just run this all the way through this system. This goes from this afternoon into Thursday. So if we stop this here around 9 p.m. Thursday, let's zoom in a little bit to Washington here. There we go. So you can see we have a lot more rain coming through Thursday night. Excuse me. So you can see the terrain features really well on this forecast. You can see that we have a good amount of rain coming up. We got rain here, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch for the lowlands, 1 inch, around an inch, maybe 1.5 inches for some of the coast. Olympia southward up to 0.9 inches, and then a lot of rain in the mountains, although most of this will be snow. One thing to note here, and I don't have a graphic up to look at it, but the more rain you get ahead of a windstorm, the higher likelihood there are for trees to uproot here in western Washington because of the saturated ground. So something to look at here is we can take a look at how much rain we've gotten over the last 24 hours. So over the last 24 hours here across parts of western Washington, you can see we've got a big rain shadow over the northern Olympic Peninsula, but places here in the lowlands have gotten a 1/2 inch over the past 24 hours, so not all that much. But if we go back to the last 72 hours, you can see most areas have gotten about 1 inch across the lowlands, the coast getting 1 to 2 inches, and places up north due to that rain shadow only getting about a 1/2 inch. So ground saturation could be an issue. We have gotten over 3 inches of rain in the past week here, so that is something to keep in mind, that some trees may fall more easily due to the saturation of the ground there. So let me catch up here on the chat. What about Bonnie Lake? Let's take a look at Bonnie Lake here. So let me zoom back in. Bonnie Lake is a very interesting area to forecast winds for because you got a lot of different terrain dynamics at play in that area with the Cascades, foothills, all of that. On the European model, though, you can see Bonnie Lake would be right down here, and you can see 50 to 55 miles per hour for Bonnie Lake. That is pretty interesting. Yeah, Bradley, that weather station did say 22 inches along Hood Canal, but that is an error. There is no way that happened. You always get a couple erroneous stations along Hood Canal there. So Bonnie Lake, I would expect 45 to 55 miles per hour. You can see the NAM shows gusts of 50 miles per hour as well. 50 miles an hour is a good bet, and something we can look at too is here. Let me take a look at our wind advisories here, and if we click on our wind advisory here on the National Weather Service Seattle site, you can see if we scroll down to the one including Bonnie Lake and some of the foothills, they're warning for gusts up to 50 miles per hour, but localized gusts up to 55 miles per hour. So 50 to 55 is a good bet for places like Bonnie Lake in the foothills. Yeah, so again, and for anyone wondering, I know we did just have that big bomb cyclone in November. This is a totally different dynamic. We're looking at bomb cyclone influenced by mountain waves. You had really localized, very strong winds out of the gaps in the Cascades. This is a more typical big southerly windstorm, big winds slamming up the Puget Sound, more widespread than the bomb cyclone, which was quite localized, but did have some big damage in those areas where the wind was strong. So here, let me catch up on some of the chat here. Sydney says, really hoping that the westerly surge doesn't push too far inland. That is a concern at times with these westerly surge. But this one doesn't look to go too far inland. You can see Everett gusts 48 miles per hour. This really is probably going to be localized to Whidbey Island there. You can see the NAM model brings it to Camano a little bit, and so does the European. You can see Camano gusting 50 to 55, but this looks to mainly impact Fidalgo Island, northern Whidbey Island, some places like Dungeness Spit there, maybe Port Townsend, and you can see Lopez Island and San Juan Island could get hit by that as well. But I don't expect this to move too far inland. I know we've had some westerly surge events in the past few years that have moved all the way into western Snohomish County and caused some big power outages and damage there, but I don't expect that to happen with this storm. Another thing we can look at here is mountain snow. We've got a lot of snow through today. You can see as we put this all the way out to tomorrow night, another foot at Snoqualmie Pass, 16 or so inches at White and Stevens Passes. Blewett probably getting 4 to 10 inches. So if you're heading back across the passes either direction over the next 24 hours, be prepared for some dicey conditions. Snoqualmie Pass was closed for a brief time this afternoon, and Stevens and White Passes have been quite snowy as well. So mountain snow is a big deal. Jordan asked, how does Bainbridge Island look? Let's take a look at this forecast here. So Bainbridge Island is right here, just to the west of Seattle, and you can see gusts of 50 to 55 miles per hour on the European model, and here on the NAM model showing gusts of 45 to 50 miles per hour. So, of course, the winds are going to be strongest near the water, so if you're on that east-facing shoreline of Bainbridge Island looking back towards Seattle and the Puget Sound metro area, that is going to be the strongest area for Bainbridge Island. However, I would expect island-wide gusts of 45 to 55 miles per hour, and that can cause power outages out there, and some of our islands like Whidbey Island, Vashon Island, Bainbridge Island, sometimes when part of the island loses power, the whole island loses power. We had an instance recently, a couple weeks ago, where the entirety of Whidbey Island lost power. Not too long ago, I have seen the entirety of Vashon Island lose power, and the entirety of Mercer Island lost power during the bomb cyclone. So that's possible. You know, our islands can lose power quite easily. Let's see. Let's also take a look. Another thing to pay attention to are the waves offshore, and these will be moving into the Washington coast. Big waves. This is tonight. You can see that those big waves are continuing through the day tomorrow. Take a look at some of these waves moving into the Washington coast. Tomorrow morning, you've got breakers probably going to be 30-plus feet out there. So dangerous conditions on the beaches, but also, you know, it's fun to watch because those are big waves like that are very interesting, but they can also be quite dangerous to the viewers. These big waves just continue all the way through Thursday. Another round Friday for the Oregon coast, and then more big waves move toward the Washington coast there on Saturday as well. So it'll be an interesting few days of wave watching if you're on the coast. While we're at it, let's take a look again at the storm here. This is the latest satellite imagery. You can see the storm is starting to push north there. We're not expecting landfall of this storm for another few hours, probably around 1 a.m. or so, maybe a little bit after that. You can see we're expecting this storm is probably going to make landfall on the Washington coast. If it makes landfall on the Oregon coast, then the impacts will likely be much further south. So that's something to keep in mind, is that the landfall location of the storm doesn't mean the worst impacts are going to be there. The worst impacts are going to be to the south of where the low center tracks. So let's take a look here at the chat a little bit more. Jordan says they're in Eagle Harbor on a boat. Last storm saw 53 knots, so it'll be interesting to see how this one affects us. Sarah says winds picking up in Eugene. Let's take a look at that. Let's see what the winds are like in the Willamette Valley right now. Yeah, we got, let's take a look at these wind gusts. You can see Willamette Valley. Yeah, you got gusts around 30 miles an hour around Eugene, starting to pick up. Newport up to 51. You can see Portland. We got some gusts there. It looks like this is out of the gorge. The wind's being sucked out of the gorge ahead of this storm. 38 miles an hour there at Troutdale. Bradley says, Cliff Mass just posted a blog. Yeah, predicted path nearly optimal for strong winds from Seattle to Olympia. Yep, that's true. And only 6 to 15 hours away. That's right. Yeah, we don't have much time before this storm hits. I mean, you can see it's pretty close offshore, and Cliff is saying there that the optimal path for producing strong winds from Seattle to Olympia. That's right, and you can see with the low predicted to curve up and make landfall in the northern Olympic Peninsula there, that is the optimal placement for strong winds over the interior. Sydney asks, is there any certainty around peak gust times for Everett northward? So yeah, timing is a big deal with this. If we back this up, you can see this is basically taking a look at peak wind gusts as of the time listed over here. So as of 4 a.m., you can see gusts of 40 miles an hour, so for parts of the lowlands, 35 around Everett and 35 to 40 Everett northward. Between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. is going to be our peak winds for the entire area. So that is basically something to keep in mind, except for the coast, peak winds 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Coast is likely going to have peak winds from 1 a.m. to 6 or 7 a.m. or so. So this is not going to be a super long duration event. We're looking at only a few hours of peak winds here. Like for the Seattle area, you're probably looking at peak winds from 3 to 4 a.m. to like 7 to 8 a.m., maybe a little bit longer. So not too long. So hopefully, Nadia, that answers your question. This storm, we shouldn't have peak winds lasting more than 6 hours or so. How windy will Vancouver, Washington get? Let's take a look. So if we put this on the Portland zoom here, so you can see there the European model shows gusts of 45 to 50 miles per hour for Vancouver there. You can see it kind of shows Vancouver a little bit wind shadowed there by some of the coast range. That's possible. Lewis County there, Lysander there. Lewis County, 50 to 55 miles per hour possible. And you can see for anyone in the Willamette Valley, there is an outside chance for these gusts of 60 plus miles per hour. So be prepared. I mean, like Emma said there in the chat, plug in your electronics, fuel the generator. Yeah, I mean, Cliff's saying it, Michael Snyder's been saying it, talking about this for a while, and so have a lot of other weather folks across the area. You know, the forecasts have been showing this for a while. They just have started to kind of consolidate in the predictions over the last few days here. Unofficial Washington State wildfire aware. Duval, Washington. Let's take a look. I know we got a lot of folks living up in that area, and there's a lot of tree cover. So Duval is right up here, kind of on the border of some of these stronger winds that the European model is showing. I would say 50 to 55 mile per hour gusts are possible for Duval. And Cam asked about Snoqualmie Ridge. That area is showing up as 50 to 60 miles per hour there along I-90 near Snoqualmie Ridge. However, a word of caution with some of those areas, the forecasts don't always pick up on some of these terrain features, like as we call them, the Issaquah Alps, some of those mountains like Tiger Mountain, Cougar Mountain, Squawk Mountain. They can block the wind at times. The NAM model shows this a little bit more. There's some wind blocking going on there along I-90. But 50 miles an hour is a good bet, I would say. 45 to 50 miles per hour for Snoqualmie Ridge. Jennifer asked, what about Shelton? Shelton is in an interesting place with this storm because depending on where the storm makes landfall, that bent back occlusion, which is the current of the strongest winds, will likely move from the coast and up through the Seattle metro. We'll see about that. Shelton could hit anywhere from 45 to 60 miles per hour. If we look at the HRRR forecast, it shows winds of 45 miles per hour for Shelton. The NAM shows 50 to 55, and the European shows 50 to 60. So I would say Shelton, the best guess would be 50 to 60 miles per hour. Power outages definitely possible. How come you think National Weather Service Portland hasn't put out an advisory yet? Great question. Chris says laziness. I would doubt it's laziness. I would say that they're just looking at a lot of different forecasts. Things have been kind of uncertain with this storm. I mean, this morning when I was making my video, there was a lot of uncertainty of kind of what some of these wind impacts are going to be and how strong the wind is going to be over certain areas. So I would say the Portland National Weather Service there probably should be a wind advisory out by now, but that's obviously not my call to make. But you can see a lot of this area, Eugene, all the way up through Portland and Vancouver, up toward Kelso and all that, will be impacted by these winds. Life's Crazy asks, what about Hobart? Hobart, kind of around North Bend there. I would say 50, 55 miles per hour is a possibility. That concerns me to see these winds for areas like Hobart and North Bend because those areas got hit so hard by the bomb cyclone. I mean, I was out in those areas and there were trees down everywhere, power lines down everywhere. So this would be not a great 1-2 punch just over a month from that bomb cyclone for areas like Hobart and Issaquah, North Bend. Bradley says Cliff is using the UW GFS model. Does that take our geography into account more than other models? It does. It runs the highest resolution that we see out of any of the models, but it's not always very good at picking up some of these wind events. Sometimes it picks it up really well, sometimes it doesn't. So, it kind of depends. The European model has proven itself many times. I mean, we can let's take a look at the model Cliff Mass is referencing here, the UW WRF GFS model. We can take a look at wind gusts across western Washington. That would be here. So let's take a look at wind gusts across western Washington. On the UW model, this is 1 a.m. Let me zoom this out a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. So this is 1 a.m. You can see it's got the gusts on the coast there, and you can see where it has the low come in. So it has the low right there on the northern Olympic Peninsula, and you can see the bent back occlusion on this forecast pretty good there. And then you can see that sharp pressure gradient move north toward Olympia and then up across western Washington. See, this is what I'm talking about here. It shows this really strong pressure gradient. You can see these lines of pressure here, but it just doesn't show very strong winds. I mean, it shows like 30-mile-an-hour gusts across like Tacoma and Kent. So it does pick up this westerly surge pretty well. That's 50 to 60 miles per hour there across Whidbey Island. But in my opinion, this is underdoing these winds for the Seattle area here. I mean, you have this really sharp pressure gradient, and it's just not showing very big winds. So one thing that I do like this model for is it does do quite well with rain and mountain snow. It picks up mountain snow pretty well with that high resolution. One thing that I do like to use this for, and we can take a look at it here, is pressure. So let's try this here. So we're looking at the state of Washington, and we just are going to put this all the way into this evening. You can see as we get to midnight, you can see that low offshore and how it starts to move right up toward that north tip of the Olympic Peninsula, moves in around 981 millibars. That's quite it's quite a low. And then you can see that sharp pressure gradient right here. These lines of constant pressure that are really close together, that's a really strong pressure gradient and a really strong pressure rise for Western Washington. We're looking here, that's 6 to 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., you still got that strong pressure gradient. So early morning tomorrow is going to be the strongest times for the winds. Here, let me catch up on the chat. So Issaquah got hit really hard last time. That's true. Unofficial Washington State wildfire alert. Do you think National Weather Service Seattle will upgrade the wind advisory to a high wind warning? I doubt that. They put the mention for gusts up to 55 miles per hour in the forecast there. What they could do is, I've seen them do this before, if this storm hits and we start to see widespread gusts of 55 plus across Western Washington, they could upgrade it to a high wind warning in storm. That's not always it doesn't really do much, but it's possible. Let's see. Merry Christmas from Breezy Squim. Merry Christmas, everybody. A says, I'm in Leavenworth. How is the wind going to be traveling back around 2 p.m. tomorrow? The wind isn't going to be so much of an issue as the snow. So wind along that US 2 corridor is going to be calm by the time we get to, much calmer by the time we get to around 2 p.m. there. So also the next Euro run is going right now, so we'll stay on the stream to take a look at that. So if we go into tomorrow afternoon, you can see it will be gusty, actually, a little bit more than I thought across US 2 there. Gusts 40 miles an hour possible, but not a ton of snow going on then. So it's just, you'll have blowing snow. I would expect pass closures. It's very possible. Let's take a look. So basically, if you are going to be going over the passes tomorrow, whether it's Stevens, Snoqualmie, White Pass, be prepared for a couple things. You're going to be prepared for heavy showers with big snow accumulations possible in those showers, low visibility, all of that, quick snow accumulations on the roads, and gusty winds at times, and that can cause blowing snow, low visibility, pass closures, chain requirements, all of that is probably expected tomorrow. Let's continue through here. Bradley asks, can you explain what a bent back occlusion is? Yeah, let's take a look at that. So the bent back occlusion is basically a fancy way of saying a really strong area of winds on the south side of a low pressure system. And we can see it right here. So if we take a look at the European model, as the low moves in, you can see, this actually shows it pretty well. You can see the low is right here, this circle, and then see these strong winds to the south of the low that kind of stretch from offshore here toward the Long Beach Peninsula. That's the bent back occlusion. It's a current of strong winds on the south side of that low pressure system, and that is what will bring the strongest winds to the Seattle area. You can see as we go to about 7 a.m., as the low moves in, that bent back occlusion is just perfectly placed between Grays Harbor and Everett there, just having these winds scream across the Seattle metro area, and then it kind of weakens as it goes into the Cascades, and then you see that westerly surge behind it. So we can kind of see the bent back occlusion in the satellite imagery right now. You can see that bent back occlusion is to the south side of these swirling clouds, which is the low here, and that is where the strongest winds will be wherever this moves on shore, this bent back occlusion here. Let's keep going. According to Emma says, according to Cliff, breezy downslope winds on the east side of the Cascades, so it'll be a nasty drive. Yeah, it will be. So what does Bellingham look like? Let's take a look at Bellingham here. There's going to be some good winds up there, I expect. So you can see Bellingham had the big winds already today, and the Euro picked this up pretty well. Euro had here, let me look at this. Euro had Bellingham, looks like the last run picked it up better than this afternoon's run did. Bellingham gusted to 61 miles an hour earlier. The last Euro run picked it up pretty well. You can see that it really depends for Bellingham. You could be right on the edge of some of these strong winds. I would guess, because Bellingham typically overperforms on some of these forecasts, I would guess that gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour are possible for Bellingham. NAM model does show that 40 to 50 miles per hour. So, yeah, I would say Bellingham 40, 50, possibly stronger. 55, not out of the question. Leon says it would be good to explain that wind force versus speed can be misinterpreted. Michael Snyder has explained this a few times. Yes, he has, and he explains it probably much better than I can. But basically, a simple way of saying this is that as wind increases, it's kind of like earthquakes. You know how a magnitude 5 earthquake is like thousands of times weaker than a magnitude 7 earthquake? So in a similar way, a 50-mile-an-hour gust can cause some damage. A 60-mile-an-hour gust can cause a massive amount of damage. So it really, as you get to about 50 miles an hour and you start increasing, once you get over 55, the damage potential increases a lot. But there's a huge difference even between a 55-mile-an-hour gust and a 60-mile-per-hour gust. And that kind of difference only increases as the winds get stronger. So yeah, Leon, like you're saying there, wind force and speed. So a 55-mile-an-hour gust has double the force of a 40-mile-an-hour gust. That's right, and that's what Michael's talked about. He has a good video on that. I can't find it right now, but you can go check that out. Whitney says, seems to be less model agreement currently than at 12 p.m. Yes and no. I think we've seen some forecasts start to come into a little bit of agreement, but the latest Euro model is running right now. So let's see if we can get that going here. Sometimes you just got to keep refreshing and see what it shows. Let's zoom out to take a look at pressure. And so the latest Euro model, we're going to play this out 6 hours. So 10 p.m., it's 9 p.m. right now. 10 p.m., the Euro has a 982 millibar low off the central northern Oregon coast. It looks like we're a little bit south of that right now. The Euro, we'll see how this curves north over the next hour or so. As it starts to move north, the Euro is looking pretty accurate so far. Mark says, where's the windstorm headed? I hope not southern BC. British Columbia will actually, I would say, be spared from this pretty well. 40 miles an hour possible for parts of British Columbia. I'm not entirely positive of the conversion to kilometers per hour there, but nothing out of the ordinary I don't expect for parts of British Columbia. Unless maybe you were on parts of southern Vancouver Island here, like Victoria and Sauk, and some of those areas could get some big gusts up toward 50, maybe 60 miles per hour. But besides that, Vancouver looks to be all right with this storm. Nothing out of the ordinary. Emma says the direction of the wind can matter too. Trees might withstand strong winds from a typical direction, but might not from a non-typical direction. That's a great point. And that's why the bomb cyclone caused so much damage, because we had these really strong winds from a atypical direction out of the east. But the thing with this storm is that if some of these forecasts verify for winds 55, 60 miles per hour over parts of the Puget Sound lowlands, while it is from the more typical southwesterly direction, that is an abnormal wind strength. So that is just something to keep in mind. Hey, Brian, welcome to the chat. Storm is coming tonight. Yes, that is true. Also, we got almost 200 folks in here. That's great. Be sure to like the live stream and subscribe here on my channel. It's a great way to help it grow and to stay informed on local weather updates. So let's keep taking a look at the Euro. Let's see how the Euro runs out here. Hey, Michael Snyder's in the chat, everybody. We're in the presence of the great ones. Here, Michael Snyder is in the chat. Roland says 30 miles. He's 30 miles due east of Bellingham and Maple Falls. Usually get half the winds that the coast gets unless the wind comes directly from the southwest up the Nooksack River Valley. I'm not entirely familiar with the geography up there, but basically, you know, if you're 30 miles east of Bellingham, sometimes these winds are just... I mean, look at it on the NAM forecast here. You can see how the wind sometimes decreases pretty rapidly as you get away from the water. So, yeah, 35, 45 miles per hour for Maple Falls. That Maple Falls is right in here, I believe. Yeah. So let's keep refreshing the Euro. You know, that's you're a real weather enthusiast when you're just staring at your screen, refreshing forecast models. So you can see it gets to 1 a.m. here. And you got 981 millibar low right off the Long Beach Peninsula. This is quite entertaining to see how this is going. Yeah, Michael is in the chat from Hawaii, everybody, and Kilauea is erupting, so I hope that we're able to see some photos of that, Michael, because that's pretty cool. That's something I would like to experience one day. Raj asks, Euro and GFS still in agreement? Let's take a look. The GFS 0Z run should be out. Yes, it is. So, Michael says it's warm and boring in Hawaii. That sounds about right for this time of year. So GFS shows... It shows almost the exact same thing as the Euro. Let's take a look at it here. So here's the 0Z Euro versus 0Z GFS. And you can see it's almost exactly the same placement. The thing is, the GFS is not going to give you the same wind forecast as the Euro, because the Euro has a much higher resolution than the GFS does. So GFS is decent for taking a look at the placement of the storm, and you can see this latest Euro isn't out yet, so we're not going to have a comparison for it. GFS brings it in just south of Nia Bay and does show that big pressure gradient across western Washington, but beyond that, its resolution is so low that it's not going to be too helpful. So let's watch the Euro keep coming in here. As we go, it's got 982 right off Nia Bay, and then it has this 986 millibar logo right over the Puget Sound. Let's take a look at that bent back occlusion and see where it places it here. So you can see we're kind of continuing with the same forecast. Bent back occlusion goes right over the Long Beach Peninsula, Columbia River Bar there, and then zooms over the Puget Sound, and then you get the westerly surge. This is going to be a lot more intuitive if we zoom in. So here we go. You can see, and I know some of you were asking about this earlier in the chat, the bent back occlusion, this is it right here. South side of the low, strong current of winds moving onshore, and then you can see how it tracks right over Puget Sound there. So let's take a look and see what wind gusts we're getting here. So this is the European model. You can see big gusts with that bent back occlusion offshore here, or right into Long Beach. You can see Cape Disappointment, Astoria gusting 60 to 70 miles per hour there. As this moves up the Puget Sound here, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., you can see it looks like it dropped the winds a little bit here, showing more 40 to 50 miles per hour. Let me see if we can get the peak winds. It actually didn't drop it as much as I thought. Let's zoom in. Here we go. So you can see we maintained the same forecast, but dropped the winds a bit. So you can see that you got winds 50 to 55 miles per hour for most areas, basically from downtown Seattle southward. This did drop out that 60 mile per hour gust over SeaTac and Renton there. But a note here with the Euro, it has a tendency of underdoing winds up the Puget Sound. So, in fact, in our last couple storms, the European model actually it showed 40 miles an hour for 45 miles an hour for SeaTac, and it hit 55 miles per hour. So that kind of shows you what's going on here. Let me take a look here in the chat. Michael says, hoping the Euro keeps the storm going. Haven't looked yet, watching with us right now. Thanks for watching along, Michael. Mike says, thanks for the update. Just found your site after the November storm. Now we follow you daily, including a bunch of family and friends. Could be talking either about me or Michael. Robert asked, do we get a break next week in the Southern Oregon Cascades? And what are we talking about there exactly? Because that could be snow, that could be wind. Let me take a look at that in just a second. Got to plug in the computer here. All right, computer's charging. There we go. Let me take a look at the Southern Oregon Cascades. We've got to zoom out a bit for that. Here, let's take a look at precipitation type. We'll go back to the last run. So Southern Oregon Cascades, you can see snow today, snow Thursday, and you get a little bit of a break. And then this looks like another low Friday morning. There's a lot of uncertainty with this low, by the way, so keep that in mind. You can see more snow for the Oregon Cascades, and then you get a break late Friday, and then it just keeps going. So, Robert, a lot of snow is coming. If you're if you're under the snow level there, a lot of rain is coming, and I would expect some breezy conditions with that as well. Let me check in on the chat here. Still waiting to see if Seattle NWS will drop an evening update to products and discussion. Forecast discussion update should come soon if it hasn't already happened. Let's refresh Portland real quick. No wind advisory yet. Let's look at the Seattle. Aaron asks about the Seattle forecast discussion. This should be updated. You can see it's not updated yet, actually. So 401 was the latest update for the forecast discussion. There should be another one tonight. And hopefully an update to some of the alerts as well. Sydney says, I would appreciate storms more if I didn't live surrounded by huge trees. I think a lot of people would say that here around Western Washington. Sonia says, please be sure to hit the like button. Thank you so much. Emma says, notice NW Seattle office tends not to post or update in real time, at least not with the recent storms. Yeah, that does happen sometimes. It seems that National Weather Service Seattle has been a little bit behind the curve with some of the wind warnings, but in their defense with this storm, forecast didn't really have much agreement until today. So the fact that they even put alerts out over the last couple days was good, with such disagreement. Leon says his 43rd birthday is tomorrow, and he's a storm spotter. Wow, that's great. Could have some good weather for your birthday. Aaron says he usually tries to read the minor evening updates at 8:45 to 9 when they get posted, but they're late or skipping it tonight. They could very well be working on some of the other products, like new alerts and stuff like that. Let's update the Euro here, make sure we get this all the way through this storm. So yeah, let's compare this Euro versus the previous run. This is a good thing to note. So you can see it backed off a little bit in terms of overall wind speeds. We dropped from, you see a previous run on the right here showed 55 to 60 miles per hour for the Cascades. And then you can see, not for the Cascades, sorry, for the Seattle Metro, right there, right over like the I-90 bridge and all that, 60 miles per hour. This dropped it down to about 50 miles per hour. And like we were talking about earlier, and Michael does have a video about this on his Pacific Northwest Weather Watch channel, there's a big difference between 50 mile an hour gust and a 60 mile an hour gust. And then you can see here across parts of the coast, we consolidated the bent back occlusion a little bit. So you can see it was kind of a wide area of big winds from ocean shores all the way down toward Astoria. Now it moves in a little bit further south, and you get those really big gusts, possibly 80 miles an hour near Cape Disappointment there, but not as strong near Westport and Hoquiam. And then that brings 50 mile an hour gusts instead of 55 to 60 mile per hour gusts over Western Washington. So this does show how relatively small differences in the forecasts in that track of the low can bring big differences. But one thing it does keep here for you Whidbey Island folks watching is the westerly surge gusting to 60 miles per hour. Dropped it from 65 to 70 miles an hour to about 60 miles per hour. And like we were talking about earlier, there's a huge difference between a 70 mile an hour gust and a 60 mile an hour gust. Although it will still be, you'll still notice this wind, and there will probably be power outages with 60 mile an hour gusts straight off the westerly surge straight at Juan de Fuca there. Roland says, I hope Puget Sound Energy increases their budget for more trucks. Yeah, that would be, they're doing the best they can. They've got hit pretty hard over the last few storms here. Mark says, why are the forecasts showing winds for Vancouver Island everywhere tomorrow morning? You're talking about southern Vancouver Island, I'm assuming, because that is where the strongest winds are likely for Vancouver Island, like so Souk, Victoria. 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour for Victoria. We can... I'm going to have to zoom out to put that in kilometers per hour. So if you know your miles per hour and you're in Canada, 50 to 55 miles an hour possible right on the coast of Victoria. 45 miles an hour inland of Victoria there. I'm not entirely familiar with the cities out there. Let's see if we got any other things to update tonight. Let's take a look at the latest NAM. This is 0Z. I don't know if I had this updated actually. So 0Z NAM is very similar to the 0Z Euro. 50 miles an hour for the whole region. And this would definitely cause impacts. There would be damage. There would be power outages. But like I said earlier, big difference between 50 and 60 miles per hour. You can see NAM has that bent back occlusion there, making landfall near Long Beach, and then moving through western Washington. Doesn't show much of a westerly surge, though, and that is something interesting to note. I still expect there will be some sort of westerly surge. It shows a little bit of one right here over the central strait there, but it doesn't reach Whidbey Island. Mark says near Nanaimo. Okay, let's look at the Euro here. We will go to Canada, and we'll go to Vancouver, and then we will go, let's look at wind. So, kilometers per hour near Nanaimo. So, let's take a look at what you guys are gonna see up there. This is going to be because of basically, as this low moves through, so you see the low is going to be moving in here. There's going to be these strong southeasterly winds that are pulled up through the northern waters of the Puget Sound and then up the Strait of Georgia, and that is what brings strong gusts to the Nanaimo area. So that is what we're looking at for those strong gusts for parts of southeast Vancouver Island there. Roland says, take winds and rain over bitter cold and snow. Too much can go wrong with the snow. That's true, it can. Bradley says, appreciate this live stream. Where can we donate? See, that's the thing. That's why I would love for you guys to subscribe, because I'm trying my best to get this channel monetized so you can donate. Right now, since this is a relatively new channel, I'm not to the point yet where you can donate money in the chats, but if we subscribe, if we like this video, then we'll get even closer to being able to monetize the channel. So I'm not going to stay on for too much longer here. We will look real quick at the this potential Friday storm. You can see that behind our storm tonight, we're looking at late Thursday into Friday here. You can see this low moving toward the Oregon coast, and it's got like this double barrel type of feature with the low to its north and then the stronger low here. This low moves into the Florence area and then casts a pressure gradient to its south and disintegrates pretty much. This storm has been, we're pretty uncertain with this one. It was showing a big blow for parts of the Oregon coast earlier with the landfall more near Long Beach, Washington there. So very uncertain, basically. This is the GFS, actually. Let's change it to the Euro. You can see similar thing. It has this low move into the southern Oregon coast versus moving it further north where it will be more damaging. This could bring strong winds to places like Eugene, maybe Burns, Oregon out there, but not a huge wind maker for parts of the Willamette Valley. Let's see, Michael Snyder says SeaTac defaults to 35 miles per hour in the forecast every single time. Very high probability that gets broken tomorrow morning. Yes, I agree with that for sure. Bradley, thank you for liking and subscribing. And he asked when Michael releases next video. Probably soon, I would expect, because of how active this is with this storm and everything. But let's see if Michael will tell us when he's releasing his next video. Baron of Gray Matter. How about Maple Valley area? Let's take a look. So Maple Valley, looking like 50 to 55 miles per hour. That's what I would expect. NAM model agrees with that, 50 to 55. And I said this earlier, but these areas is kind of concerning because although the wind is from a totally different direction, there's still a lot of areas that got hit real hard by that bomb cyclone a month ago, especially like Miramont up there on the southern slopes of Tiger Mountain. I saw an article recently, I believe from Como News, that Miramont is still totally wrecked from that bomb cyclone, and there's tree debris and all of that still sitting around, and then you're going to have 50-mile-an-hour winds blow through there. That could cause some more damage to some of those areas. There's a lot of trees that have been weakened in the areas downstream of the gaps in the Cascades by the bomb cyclone, and even though these winds are coming from a different direction, weakened trees is never a good thing. And everyone, Michael says he'll be releasing another video early tomorrow morning or later tonight. Remember, Hawaii is 2 hours behind Western Washington, I believe, so it's only 7:35 there. Let's see. Mark Skelton, thank you for liking and subscribing this to the channel. Let's take one more look here at the satellite imagery. You can see the storm is starting to move north a bit there. We're just going to have to wait and see over the next few hours what this thing does. Typically, our storms get to here and start to curve north pretty good. That is what the European model showed. Let's take a look at that again. We are looking at the latest European model forecast. This is 10 p.m. there, and you've got the low right off the central Oregon coast. We're pretty close to that at this point, a tad bit further south. So we'll see how this changes. Wind gusts right now. Let's check the Oregon coast one more time as this starts to increase. You can see 72 miles an hour off of Newport there, and you got some 45 miles an hour so far at Newport, directly out of the south as predicted. So you can see not all that much going on across Puget Sound. Pretty calm here. You do have some gap winds going there near Highway 18 I-90 interchange, gusts 32 miles an hour. That's just the winds ahead of this low being pulled out of the gaps. Mark says I'm going to overtake Michael. I don't think that's going to happen, but wishful thinking, Mark. Thank you. And Mark also says even in East Renton, there is still large branches on power lines. Yeah, that's a big concern. There's a lot of places like that around some of the areas that got hit hardest by the bomb cyclone. I've even seen a few branches on lines around parts of the Tacoma Federal Way areas. So, you know, that is concerning, because anytime you have branches on lines, as the wind starts to blow around that even more, you can get a lot more, damage. You get more power outages. So, if you're in the areas that got hit hard by that bomb cyclone, specifically eastern King County, do watch out, because weakened trees, branches still on power lines, maybe power lines that are not fully repaired and all that, that's not good, because you can definitely get some more damage with that. Let's take a look at the radar right now. You see you got some moderate rain across the Central Sound there. You got more rain offshore. And it's just going to keep raining up until this storm moves through and it clears out the rain, brings the strong winds. Like I said earlier, all of this rain falling is saturating the ground more. So, let's see. Michael says we need all the weather peeps we can get. The bigger the better for everyone. That is true. Aaron says definitely still a lot of lingering damage that hasn't quite been fixed in southeast King County. So like I was saying, those areas, southeast King County, showing up at 50 miles per hour for on the NAM and the European there, and there's pretty good agreement between these two for places like southeast King County that there is going to be some big gusts down there. DFM says no wind advisory in Lake Stevens tonight. I'm pretty sure there is a wind advisory in Lake Stevens. Let me double check, but I thought that was issued. It looked like the entire Puget Sound had that wind advisory. Do you still think there's a chance this low could come in more south? It's possible. We are definitely in a nowcasting situation at this point. I mean, there is a chance it could come in further south. There's a chance it could come in right as we expect it to. So I'll be posting updates on my social media, my Blue Sky account, my Twitter account, and my Facebook group as we go through tonight. Yeah, it looks like there is a wind advisory in Lake Stevens there. Let's take a look at it for you there. So if we click on it here, you can see this is the same wind advisory that's in effect for the rest of the region. Gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Localized gusts up to 55 miles an hour are possible. Keith says there will be a strong convergence zone over northern Snohomish County after this passes. That's a good thing to look at. Let's take a look at radar. So here, if we look at, this is basically the high-resolution rapid refresh model, and we're basically showing simulated radar, so what it predicts the radar is going to look like. You can see that heavy rain across the Central Sound tonight clears out into heavy showers early this morning as that windstorm moves through, and then you get more heavy showers around 5-6 a.m., and then you get the westerly surge, and it looks like this one doesn't go out that far. Let's go out a little bit further here, see if we do get that convergence zone. You can see some convergence zone bands showing up over the Central Cascades. But this doesn't look to be a huge convergent zone maker. I wouldn't be surprised to see some convergent zone formation, but as always, it kind of varies between Arlington, Seattle, on where that's actually going to form. And then you can see our next system starts to move into the area by tomorrow night with another round of rain and mountain snow. So not very much of a break between these two systems, although our second system will not have much wind. So at least not as of now. That could change. We lost power 2 nights ago. I'll probably wake up to no power again. It's possible. Let's see, Mark Stewart says, absolutely agree, Michael. Can't think of many other big channels hopping on chat in a smaller live stream. Yeah, that's true. So big thanks to Michael, everybody, for supporting here and for helping out with giving us some more information in the chat there. So it's getting to about 9:45 p.m. We've been streaming for over an hour here. I'm probably going to wrap it up soon. But before I wrap it up, any last minute questions we want to get in the chat? We got over 200 folks in here. I'd love to answer any more questions about how strong the wind is going to be at your locations. So just let me know if you got any more questions. We'll take a look at a couple of more wind forecasts here. We'll take a look again at the high resolution rapid refresh model. You can see it's picking up an area of 45 to 50 mile per hour gusts right around Seattle there, around Des Moines, Alki, SeaTac Airport, Bellevue. You can see some semblance of a westerly surge there across parts of the strait, and then that bent back occlusion and very strong winds over parts of the Long Beach Peninsula. Aaron says National Weather Service Seattle has posted the latest area forecast discussion, forecast on track, so they won't pull the trigger on updates until the morning. That's very possible. We'll see if they do any updates really, really early in the morning. In Issaquah, is hoping to not have deja vu. Hopefully not. Issaquah won't get hit in the same way that they did with the bomb cyclone. Bomb cyclone winds were out of the east. These winds are out of the south. So Issaquah, to a point, gets blocked by some of the mountains to the south. Sydney asks, Gus, in Arlington, let's take a look at our comparison here. Arlington's going to be this one right here. You can see 45 to 50 miles per hour is my guess. 45 looks to be about the peak there in Arlington. Let's see. Bradley asked you to check the wind forecast for Wilkeson and Carbonado near Mount Rainier. Is planning to head into the hills in the morning. So Wilkeson's down here. This blob you have right here is the wind on Mount Rainier. The thing with Wilkeson and Carbonado is that there's a lot of valleys there, so some areas can get really sheltered and some can't. Once you start to get up into the hills, I would, if I were you, not do that before 10 a.m. because there's still going to be winds gusting at 8 a.m., possibly later than that, and there could be a lot of trees down out there. You might not be able to make it too far. Power outages, down trees, down power lines. I would expect Wilkeson and Carbonado gusting 40 to 50 miles per hour. The wind advisory is in effect for those areas as well. Jaden says, looks like the 0-0 backed off a bit on the wind gusts. Is this maybe going to be a weaker event? It backed off a bit, but it still shows 53 miles an hour at SeaTac and in Seattle. So that's not a weak event for this area. It could be weaker than the previous run, but it's not, overall, it's not a weak event for this area. This is still a very strong event for this area. Washington State Wildfire Aware says, any chance winds are stronger than the downgrade that happened for the Euro? Definitely. You can see kind of that the NAM shows a similar strength to the Euro, but like I said earlier, Euro can sometimes underdo these winds. So at this point, it's kind of anyone's guess as to those really minute details of, like, do we get 55 miles an hour, 52 miles an hour, or something like that. Jackie says, how about Auburn? Auburn's an interesting one because it doesn't really show it on these maps, but sometimes Auburn can be a little bit sheltered. I would say 45 to 55 miles per hour possible for Auburn. Probably stronger if you're on either one of the hills on each side of the valley. Justin says, what about wind speeds for Prosser, Washington? There are going to be some winds across eastern Washington, and that's going to be going on during the day tomorrow. And if we played this through here, you can see the Euro shows maybe 30 to 40 miles per hour. The NAM is going to show something a bit stronger probably. So let's take a look at the NAM. Eastern Washington. The NAM shows much stronger. You see 46 in Yakima, 50 or so in Prosser, 52 in the Tri-Cities. So that's possible. You could get some. This is definitely worse for truck drivers because you got a wide open area with big winds. So I would say Prosser anywhere between 35 and 50 miles per hour. I would say 35 to 45 as a ballpark. You're welcome, Sarah. Glad to do this. Roland says update around 3:30 a.m. probably for NW Seattle there. Whitney says GFS has dropped the wind speeds a good amount. Possibly, but as I was saying earlier, the GFS is so low resolution that its wind forecasts are quite irrelevant for this area. Hoping this won't knock out of power for 2.5 days in Newcastle. I hope not. Also, that would be quite bad. Alan says, how about Port Orchard? We seem to miss the strongest winds. Port Orchard is right in here. I would say 40 to 50 miles an hour. You may not miss this, but there could be some areas, like I was saying, that are a little bit more sheltered that have lower wind speeds than some other areas. Let's see. Doug says, can you tell us about the winds on Orcas Island? So Orcas Island is right up here. You can see the Euro shows gusts up to 50 to 55 miles an hour, and so does the NAM, and the HER does as well. So Orcas Island, I would say 50 to 55 miles an hour. Very good bet. Thank you, Alex. I'm very glad to have you on the channel as well. I'm very glad to have all of you on the channel watching and engaging. It's great. LA Film Scene says Westport. Westport's going to be pretty gnarly depending on the forecast you look at. 50 to 65 miles an hour for Westport. Pretty strong. Sydney says, so the NAM overdoes the winds and the Euro underdoes them. Not exactly. The NAM typically overdoes it, but it's actually performed quite well in our last couple storms over the last couple weeks. So I guess this storm will be a big tell-all for which forecast does best. North Bend, Oregon, that's way down here. It's going to be getting pretty strong there over the next couple hours here. Gusts really from 65 to 75 miles an hour possible for North Bend, Oregon, and for a lot of the Oregon coast. When is this going to happen? Yep, early tomorrow morning. Peak winds for the Puget Sound area, likely, I would say, 3 to 4 a.m. all the way to 9 a.m. Earlier on the coast. Then that westerly surge, 7 to 10 a.m. for Whidbey Island. There's the Ording Valley, Sumner area get the benefit of the valley shelter. Sometimes I've noticed it does help, but sometimes it funnels through. It really does depend on the direction of the wind a little bit. Sumner and Ording Valley, you get stronger winds on some of the hilltops. I would say Ording is definitely more sheltered than Sumner, though. Roland says, Noah, suggesting that after this system, the following ones are a bit weaker. Definitely so. Alaska Raven Lady, hello from stormy southeast Alaska. Hey there, that's pretty far away from western Washington, but I'm sure there's some pretty big storms up there as well. The Gulf of Alaska has just been super active lately. Doug, you're welcome. Vance says, how about Monroe? Monroe's going to be right up here to the west of, or to the east of Everett. There you can see Euro has gusts of 35 to 40 miles an hour, 35 to 45 for Monroe. The NAM has 45 to 50. So your range is really 35 to 50. I would ballpark 40 to 45 for Monroe. And again, some areas, more in valleys, could be sheltered a little bit more. You're welcome, Nancy, for the information. Will I be safe? I'm on the middle of Vancouver Island. If you're around Nanaimo, you're expecting probably gusts up toward 50 miles per hour. But that's nothing really out of the ordinary. This is not going to be a super strong storm once you get north of the border. So I don't expect anything too significant for Vancouver, BC, or Vancouver Island. If you do want more information about weather in Canada, go and follow my friend Ryan Voutilainen, and he's on Blue Sky, he's on Twitter, and he has the Vancouver and the BC Lower Mainland weather group on Facebook. So Ryan's a great source for BC weather if you're in the Lower Mainland, if you're on Vancouver Island. Let me keep going through the track here. Keith says, winds from Seattle southward almost due north or northeast. Is that a sign of a further track to the south? Not really. That basically is just a sign that the winds are going to be pulled straight up north through the Puget Sound lowlands. You're welcome, LA Film Scene, and Merry Christmas to you as well. Roland says, will AI models eventually make all others obsolete? Yeah, that's kind of that's a debate right now. You know, it's not entirely we're not sure, what's going to happen with AI. The future is really unknown with that, but I hope and believe we will still need human weather forecasters because computers can't do everything. And like, for example, even something like this live stream, a computer isn't necessarily going to tell you all of the information we can look at here with these forecast models. So it's important that we have human forecasters to communicate the very hyper-local risk. This is something that AI can't necessarily do. Thank you all for tuning in for the live stream here. DRT Maverick says, headed down Highway 101 from Oregon to Northern California. If you're doing that now, it's going to be pretty nuts. You can see some of these winds on the Oregon coast there are just going to be crazy. I mean, you got gusts up to like 65 miles an hour for Crescent City, 75 miles an hour for Gold Beach. Let's actually take a look at the wind down there right now, because that area should be increasing. So here, southern Oregon into northern California. Yeah, it's increasing right there. Gold Beach reporting south wind 45, gusting to 63. You can see Crescent City gusting to 41. So that area is going to be Highway 101 from Oregon to Northern California. Huge winds there over the next few hours. So be very careful or delay your travel. Why is Salem, Oregon predicted to be so windy? That really depends on that pressure gradient that moves. And you can see the Euro has Salem at 56 miles per hour. And the NAM here has Salem up to 65. I don't anticipate it getting that strong. That would be a very damaging windstorm for parts of the Willamette Valley. I expect Salem to be more in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range there. AJ420, you're welcome. Glad I could do this live stream. DRT Maverick says Humbug Mountain area gets scary driving during windstorms. Yeah, that is this big mountain. There's a lot of big mountains that 101 comes right around, and you got a huge coastal vista on the Oregon coast. Some of those places are just going to be crazy. Kirk, how about Briar? Remind me again where Briar is, Kirk. I know that's here in western Washington, but I'm not exactly sure where that is. So yeah, I mean, Willamette Valley, 45 to 50 miles per hour. Maybe it will be stronger. We'll see how this storm trends. Let's take a look at the satellite here. You can see it is starting to pull north. So we're just going to have to wait and see. You can see it's starting to wrap up a lot more right here. You see that low, that bent back occlusion. It's moving up toward the Washington coast. It's on a path for parts of the Washington coast. We'll see how this goes overnight. I will be posting on all of my social media channels, and we can look at those here. I'm here on Blue Sky, and a lot of us weather folks are on Blue Sky. I have my Western Washington Weather Facebook group, which is almost to 1,000 members, so that is super awesome. Thank you to everybody who's on the Facebook group already. And then I am on Twitter as well, and that is, so Blue Sky Twitter, short form updates, and Western Washington Weather Facebook group, long form updates here. You can see that we, like here, this is what I did earlier today on Western Washington Weather Facebook. Big explanation of everything that's going on. I'll do another one of these before I go to bed tonight. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It was great to do this live stream. I'll try to do some more live streams when we have more active weather going on. So you can end here with the satellite imagery. You see the storm. It's moving up. It's happening, folks. It's still got lightning going on the south side of it, too. So it is still strengthening a lot. So, yep, it's going to be an interesting night. Stay tuned to my social media. I'll be reposting other weather folks from around this area as well. And be safe. Good things to remember. If you have a generator, make sure you got fuel for it. If you've got candles, flashlights, have all that kind of stuff. And charge your devices. Big thing to keep your devices charged so you don't have your phone dead in the middle of a power outage. So, and then be prepared, of course, for tree damage, power outages, road closures across the area. And stay tuned to all of us weather folks around the area. I'm going to hop off the stream here. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, for subscribing, for engaging in the chat. And I will try my best to do a video tomorrow morning, unless, of course, I have no power. Then that won't be happening. So, thank you, everybody, for watching, and I will talk to you all later.